One man's quiet observation saved $100 million and changed 3 lives forever. Nathan Whitaker pushed his cart down the marble hallway of Barrett Industries at 2:47 a.m., the wheels squeaking in rhythm with his tired heartbeat. The building was tomb silent except for the hum of servers and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the lobby. But tonight, something was different. Light spilled from the executive conference room like a wound bleeding gold across the dark corridor. Inside, chaos lived on whiteboards. Equations sprawled across glass walls in desperate red ink. Coffee cups stood sentinel around laptops that blinked with error messages. The smell of burnt espresso and panic hung thick in the air. Nathan had seen this before. Crisis mode. The kind that turned million-dollar executives into sleepless zombies and made assistants cry in bathroom stalls. But he'd never seen it this bad. Lincoln Barrett, CEO of Barrett Industries, stood frozen at the head of the table, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled, his tie loose around his collar like a noose. His fingers gripped a tablet so tightly his knuckles had gone white. 63 hours, Lincoln whispered to the empty room. 63 hours until the presentation, and we've got nothing but smoke and mirrors. Nathan paused his cart outside the door. He shouldn't be listening. Janitors were invisible, background noise in a symphony of corporate desperation. But something about the defeat in Lincoln's voice made him stay. The algorithm that was supposed to revolutionize supply chain logistics had crashed. Not just glitched, crashed like a meteor hitting Earth. 3 months of development, a team of 12 engineers, and $100 million in investor commitments hung in the balance. Nathan's eyes drifted to the whiteboard where lines of code twisted. Like barbed wire. He'd seen this pattern before, years ago, in another life when he wore suits instead of uniforms and spoke in boardrooms instead of broom closets. Before Luna was born. Before everything changed, Lincoln sank into his chair, head in his hands. How do you explain to investors that their money vanished because of a coding error no one can find? Nathan's hand tightened on his card handle. He knew that feeling. The weight of responsibility crushing down until you couldn't breathe. The moment when everything you've built threatens to crumble and you're powerless to stop it. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't powerless tonight. The janitor who used to be something else stepped closer to the glass door, his reflection ghosting across the surface like a question mark waiting to be answered. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And when it all unfolds, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. I read every comment, and your words mean everything. Because what happened next would prove that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, wearing the humblest uniform, pushing the quietest cart through the loudest crisis of the night. Nathan Whitaker had been invisible for 3 years. Every night, he arrived at Barrett Industries at midnight, cleaned until dawn, and disappeared before the first executive stepped off the elevator. His daughter Luna never asked why Daddy worked while she slept, never questioned why their apartment smelled like industrial cleaner instead of cologne. She was 7 now, gap-toothed and brilliant, with eyes that held more wisdom than most adults. Nathan had met in corporate boardrooms. Every morning, she'd be waiting at the kitchen table with toast cut into star shapes and a drawing of whatever had sparked her imagination the night before. Daddy, she'd said just that evening, holding up a crayon masterpiece of a man in overalls standing next to a castle. Do you think cleaning things makes them magic? Why would you think that, little star? He'd asked, tying her shoelaces in perfect loops. Because everything you touch gets better. Maybe buildings need magic too. Now, standing outside Lincoln Barrett's crisis, Nathan wondered if Luna was right that he'd been Dr. Nathan Whitaker once. MIT graduate, systems analyst, the kind of man who solved impossible puzzles for Fortune 500 companies. But when Luna's mother, Sarah, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, the puzzles suddenly didn't matter. Hospital bills did. Time did. Holding Sarah's hand through chemo sessions mattered more than stock options or corner offices. After Sarah died, Nathan discovered that grief has a peculiar mathematics. Daycare costs plus medical debt divided by a broken heart equals choices no parent should make. The consulting firm offered condolences and 3 months leave. They meant well, but bills don't pause for bereavement. So Dr. Nathan Whitaker became Nathan the night janitor, trading algorithms for ammonia, solutions for solitude. Tonight, He watched Lincoln Barrett pace the conference room like a caged animal. The CEO's tablet displayed the smoking wreckage of 3 months' work, a supply chain optimization algorithm that was supposed to save Barrett Industries $100 million annually. Nathan could see the problem from here. The code on the whiteboard wasn't wrong, it was incomplete. Like a symphony missing its crescendo, a puzzle with the corner piece lost under the couch. The engineers had built something beautiful and complex, but they'd overlooked the elegant simplicity that made beautiful things work. That Nathan's hands moved to his cart, fingers finding the worn notebook he kept hidden beneath cleaning supplies. Inside, sketches and equations lived alongside grocery lists and Luna's doodles. Old habits died hard, and his mind still saw patterns everywhere. In traffic flows, in Luna's bedtime routine, in the way sunlight moved across their apartment. While his phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, Luna's babysitter. She's asleep. Asked me to tell you the castle drawing is for your work friends. Says they might need magic tonight. Nathan smiled despite the weight pressing on his chest. Luna's intuition was better than any algorithm. He looked back at the conference room, where Lincoln stared at his tablet like it might suddenly reveal answers. The CEO's coffee had gone cold hours ago. His jacket hung over the chair like a flag of surrender. Nathan made a decision that would change everything. That he knocked on the glass door. Lincoln looked up, confusion flickering across his exhausted features. He gestured Nathan inside with the weary resignation of a man who'd accept help from anyone at this point. Sir, Nathan said quietly, stepping into the room that smelled of desperation and burnt coffee. I think I might see something. Lincoln. Barrett studied the janitor standing in his doorway like he was solving a riddle in a foreign language. You think you see something? Lincoln repeated, his voice carrying 3 months of exhaustion and a lifetime of skepticism. Nathan nodded toward the whiteboard. The optimization loop. It's not broken. It's just looking in the wrong direction. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a bridge neither man was sure could hold their weight. Lincoln's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with the desperate curiosity of a drowning man who'd just been thrown a rope he wasn't sure was real. And you are? Nathan Whitaker. Night maintenance. Nathan Whitaker, Lincoln repeated slowly. And you understand supply chain algorithms, because Nathan's hands tightened on his cart handle. The truth felt rusty in his throat, like words from a language he'd almost forgotten. I used to work with systems like this. Different life. Lincoln gestured toward the whiteboard with something between invitation and challenge. Show me. Nathan approached the chaos of equations like he was greeting an old friend. His eyes traced the logic flows, the nested loops, the elegant complexity that had taken a team of brilliant minds 3 months to build. It was beautiful work, sophisticated, thorough, and fundamentally flawed in the simplest possible way. Here, Nathan said, pointing to a cluster of variables in the center of the board. Your algorithm is optimizing for efficiency, but it's treating each supply point as independent. Supply chains aren't independent, they're ecological. They breathe together. He picked up a red marker, hesitated for a heartbeat, then drew a simple circle around 3 seemingly unrelated variables. If you link these 3 inputs and let them influence each other in real time instead of sequential processing, the optimization curve doesn't just improve, it compounds. Lincoln moved closer, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. That's actually brilliant. But the processing power required would be minimal, Nathan finished. Because you're not adding complexity, you're finding the natural rhythm that was already there. Nathan sketched a simple diagram beneath the existing code, not replacing it, but revealing the hidden music in the mathematics. His handwriting was careful, precise, the muscle memory of a man who once lived in boardrooms instead of utility closets. The efficiency gains would be. Lincoln pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the screen as he input Nathan's modifications. Numbers cascaded down the display. 28% improvement. Minimum. Could be higher, Nathan said quietly. Complex systems usually surprise you. Lincoln looked up from his tablet, really seeing Nathan for the first time. What did you say your name was? Nathan Whitaker. Dr. Nathan Whitaker. The question hung in the air like smoke. Nathan felt his past and present collide in the space between heartbeats. Used to be. MIT. Systems optimization. You published that paper on adaptive logistics networks in 2019. Lincoln's voice carried a note of wonder. You disappeared from the conference circuit about 3 years ago. Everyone wondered what happened to you. Ruby Vaughn stepped into the room, took one look at the modified equations, and said 4 words that would change everything. Who the hell are you? Ruby Vaughn had been awake for 37 hours straight. Her coffee had evolved from fuel to religion to the only thing standing between her and complete mental collapse. She'd sent her team home at midnight, claiming she needed quiet to think, but really she just couldn't watch their hope drain away like water through broken hands. Now, she stood in the doorway of Lincoln's conference room, staring at equations that looked like her months of work had been kissed by lightning. "I asked you a question," she said, her voice carrying the edge of someone who'd run out of patience somewhere around hour 20. "Who are you? And how did you fix 3 months of code in 10 minutes? Nathan straightened, suddenly aware that his janitor's uniform felt like a costume in a play he'd forgotten he was performing. "Nathan Whitaker. I work here." "Doing what exactly?" "Maintenance. Night shift." Ruby's eyes moved from Nathan to the whiteboard to Lincoln, who was still staring at his tablet like it had just performed a miracle. "Lincoln, please tell me you didn't just let a janitor rewrite our core algorithm." "Ruby," Lincoln said quietly. "He didn't rewrite it. He completed it." She moved closer to the board, her storm cloud eyes scanning Nathan's additions. Ruby had built her career on being the smartest person in rooms full of smart people. She could spot flawed logic from across a conference table and tear apart faulty assumptions like tissue paper. But this was elegant, simple, the kind of solution that made you wonder why no one had seen it before. "The ecological approach," she murmured, tracing Nathan's diagram with her finger, treating the supply nodes as interdependent rather than sequential. She turned to Nathan, her expression shifting from suspicion to something more dangerous, curiosity. "Where did you study?" "MIT. Obviously. But that's not what I'm asking." Ruby crossed her arms. "I'm asking where a systems optimization PhD ends up pushing a janitor's cart through my building at 3 in the morning." Nathan felt the familiar weight settling on his chest, the story he'd told himself 1,000 times, the choices that had led him from corner offices to broom closets. "My wife got sick. Then she died. I had a daughter to raise and bills to pay. This job has good insurance and flexible hours." The room went quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant city traffic 40 floors below. Ruby's expression softened by degrees, like ice melting in warm water. "I'm sorry," she said, and Nathan could tell she meant it. "But I have to ask, why didn't you say something sooner? You've been here 3 years, watching us struggle with problems you could solve in your sleep." Nathan looked down at his hands, rough now from cleaning supplies instead of smooth from keyboard work. "Because Dr. Nathan Whitaker failed at the most important thing in his life. I couldn't save Sarah. I couldn't keep my family together. I couldn't even keep my own career afloat." He looked up, meeting Ruby's eyes. "Nathan the janitor just cleans things. He doesn't pretend to save the world." Ruby stared at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the whiteboard and picked up a blue marker. "Well, Nathan the janitor," she said, adding her own notes to his diagram. "Tonight you might have saved mine." She worked quickly, her additions flowing from Nathan's foundation like water finding its natural course. Lincoln joined them at the board, tablet forgotten, all 3 minds working in unexpected harmony. "If we implement this before the presentation," Ruby said, stepping back to survey their work, "we're not just meeting projections. We're exceeding them." "By how much?" Lincoln asked. Ruby pulled out her phone, fingers flying across a calculator app. "Conservative estimate? 42%. Efficiency gains. Best case scenario." She looked up, a smile breaking across her tired face like sunrise. "We're looking at $150 million in annual savings." Nathan felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, the electric thrill of solving an impossible puzzle. But underneath, the satisfaction was something else, fear. Because success meant visibility, and visibility meant questions he wasn't sure he was ready to answer. "There's just one problem," Ruby said, her smile fading. "The board presentation is in 60 hours. I need to brief my team, run simulations, prepare Lincoln for investor questions." She looked at Nathan. "And I need the man who cracked this code to help me make sure we don't miss anything." Nathan's throat went dry. "I can't." I have responsibilities. My daughter, bring her, Lincoln said suddenly. Both Nathan and Ruby turned to stare at him. What? We've got a child care center on the 32nd floor. Better than most schools. She could spend a day seeing where Daddy works. Ruby nodded slowly. It's Saturday tomorrow anyway. We could use all hands on deck. And frankly, I'd rather have you here making sure we don't screw this up than worry about what we might miss. Nathan thought of Luna, probably dreaming about castles and magic. Thought of the drawing she'd made. Him, the one about cleaning, making things magical. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from who he used to be. Okay, he said quietly. But only if Luna wants to come. Ruby grinned. Something tells me she will. Saturday morning came too soon and not soon enough. Nathan stood outside Barrett Industries with Luna's small hand in his, watching the city wake up around them. She wore her favorite dress, the one with tiny rockets on it, and carried a backpack stuffed with coloring books, her tablet, and the remnants of the breakfast sandwich she'd been too excited to finish. Daddy, she said, craning her neck to look up at the 40-story tower of glass and steel. Your work friends live really high up. They do, little star. Are they nice? Nathan squeezed her hand. I think you'll like them. Inside, the weekend. Energy was different. Quieter, but more intense. Ruby met them in the lobby wearing jeans and an MIT sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger this way, more human. You must be Luna, Ruby said, kneeling to Luna's eye level. I'm Ruby. I work with your dad. Luna studied Ruby with the serious attention she usually reserved for new picture books. Daddy says you're really smart. Your dad's pretty smart too. No, Luna said matter-of-factly. He fixes everything. The child care center was a wonderland of soft play areas, art stations, and reading nooks. Luna's eyes went wide as she took in the jungle gym that looked like a spaceship and the wall of books that stretched from floor to ceiling. This is better than the library, she whispered to Nathan. Camila Donovan, the weekend child care coordinator, was a woman in her 50s with paint-stained fingers and a smile that could power small cities. She took one look at Luna and declared them instant best friends. We're going to build the most magnificent castle this place has ever seen, Camila announced, complete with dragons and secret passages. Luna looked back at Nathan with shining eyes. Can I stay here forever? Just for today, little star. The elevator ride to the executive floor was quiet. Nathan watched the numbers climb and felt like he was rising toward a past he'd tried to bury. Ruby stood beside him, tablet in hand, occasionally glancing his way with expressions he couldn't quite read. Nervous? She asked as they passed the 20th floor. Terrified, he admitted. Good. Means it matters. The conference room had been transformed overnight. The chaotic whiteboard had been organized into clean sections. 3 large monitors displayed simulations running in real time. Lincoln was already there, along with a man Nathan didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Nathan's rent. Nathan, Lincoln said, standing as they entered. Meet Asher Holden, our Chief Technology Officer. Asher extended his hand with the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. So you're the janitor who's causing all this excitement. The word janitor hung in the air like a challenge. Nathan felt Ruby tense beside him. I prefer problem solver, Nathan said evenly, meeting Asher's handshake with steady pressure. Of course. Asher's smile sharpened. Well, let's see if your solutions hold up under scrutiny. The next 4 hours were brutal. Asher questioned every assumption, challenged every calculation, poked at Nathan's elegant solution like he was looking for cracks in a foundation. He pulled up competing algorithms, threw theoretical scenarios at the optimization model, and generally made it clear that he considered Nathan's presence an insult to every PhD on his payroll. The efficiency gains are impressive on paper, Asher said, pulling up a simulation that showed Nathan's algorithm performing flawlessly across a dozen scenarios. But real-world supply chains aren't laboratory conditions. What happens when a port strike shuts down the West Coast? What happens when a hurricane disrupts shipping routes? What happens when human unpredictability meets your perfect mathematical model? Nathan felt sweat gathering at his collar. Ruby shot him an encouraging look, but doubt was creeping in like fog. Maybe he'd been foolish to think he could step back into this world. Maybe Asher was right. Maybe being a janitor for 3 years had dulled edges he didn't even know were sharp. Run the stress tests, Nathan said quietly. Asher raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You want to know what happens when chaos meets the algorithm? Run the stress tests. Port strikes, natural disasters, market volatility. Throw everything at it and see what breaks. Lincoln leaned forward. Nathan, are you sure? If the model fails under stress testing, then we'll know now instead of in front of the investors, Nathan finished. Better to fail here than fail publicly. Ruby was already pulling up the testing protocols. Asher, you want to do the honors? For the next hour, they watched Nathan's solution get pummeled by every disaster scenario in Barrett Industries' database. Port strikes, hurricanes, cyber attacks, economic crashes. Each stress test hit the algorithm like a hammer blow, and each time, the algorithm adapted, bent, found new pathways, and kept optimizing. Impossible, Asher muttered, staring at the results. The resilience metrics are off the charts. Nathan watched the simulations run and felt something he'd almost forgotten. Pride. Not the desperate validation he'd chased in his previous career, but the quiet satisfaction of building something that worked. It's not impossible, he said. It's just designed differently. Most algorithms try to predict chaos. This one accepts it and adapts. Ruby was grinning at her tablet. Nathan, do you realize what this means? We're not just meeting our efficiency targets. We're creating a system that gets stronger under pressure. But Asher wasn't finished. He pulled up one final test, a scenario so complex and devastating that it had crashed every optimization system Barrett Industries had ever tested. Let's see how your miracle handles this, he said, his finger hovering over the execute button. Nathan felt his throat go dry. Because if the algorithm failed now, after everything, he wasn't sure he could handle watching his daughter's face when he told her daddy couldn't fix this one after all. The stress test from hell lasted 18 minutes. Nathan watched 18. Simulated months of disaster cascade across the monitors, supply chain collapses, economic downturns, natural disasters, and cyber attacks all hitting simultaneously like the universe's worst possible day. For the first few minutes, the algorithm held steady. Then it began to strain. Red warning indicators bloomed across the displays like digital blood. Ruby gripped her tablet so tightly her knuckles went white. Lincoln stopped breathing altogether, but Nathan watched something else, the way his solution bent without breaking, the way it found pathways through chaos that no one had programmed it to look for. It's learning, he whispered. What? Ruby asked without taking her eyes off the cascading data. Look at the adaptation patterns. It's not just surviving the stress test. It's learning from it. Each disaster makes it smarter, more resilient. Asher leaned closer to his monitor, disbelief written across his features. That's not supposed to happen. Optimization. Algorithms don't evolve in real time. Mine does, Nathan said quietly. Because it's not trying to control the chaos. It's trying to dance with it. The final minutes of the simulation played out like a symphony building to crescendo. The algorithm found rhythms in randomness, patterns in pandemonium. By the end, it wasn't just meeting efficiency targets. It was exceeding them by margins that should have been mathematically impossible. The monitors went quiet. Final results populated the screen. Efficiency improvement, 67%. Cost savings, $187 million annually. System resilience, 94% uptime under maximum stress conditions. Asher stared at the numbers like they'd been written in a language he didn't understand. This changes everything. No, Ruby said, looking at Nathan with something close to awe. This saves everything. Lincoln was already reaching for his phone. I need to call the board. We're not just presenting an optimization system. On Monday, we're presenting a revolution. But Nathan felt a familiar weight settling on his chest. The same pressure he'd felt in his previous life, when success meant expectations and expectations meant 1,000 ways to fail. I should check on Luna, he said, moving toward the door. Nathan, wait. Ruby caught his arm. You realize what just happened, right? You didn't just solve our problem. You created something that could transform how every major corporation manages logistics. This is Nobel Prize territory. Nathan looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. 3 years ago, I would have killed for a moment like this. Today, all I can think about is whether Luna's having fun building castles. That doesn't make you weak, Ruby said softly. That makes you human. It makes me different than I used to be. Better different or worse different? Nathan considered this. I don't know yet. The elevator ride to the childcare center felt like descending from a mountain back to earth. When the doors opened, Nathan could hear Luna's laughter echoing down the hallway. Bright, infectious, utterly carefree. He found her in the art corner with Camila, both covered in finger paint and grinning like co-conspirators. Between them lay a canvas that looked like a cross between a castle and a spaceship, complete with rainbow bridges and what appeared to be a dragon wearing a crown. Daddy, Luna launched herself at him, leaving tiny blue handprints on his shirt. Look what we made. It's a castle for people who fix things. Nathan knelt to examine their masterpiece. It's beautiful, little star. Tell me about it. See, this is where the fixing happens. She pointed to a room with windows shaped like stars. And this is where the fixing people live with their families. And this is where the dragons help carry all the heavy things so nobody gets tired. Dragons that help carry things. Of course, the best dragons don't breathe fire, they breathe hope. Nathan felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening like a door he'd kept locked for too long. Luna, he said carefully, how would you feel if Daddy's work here wasn't just nighttime anymore? If maybe he worked with his friends during the day too? Luna tilted her head, studying his face with the intensity she usually reserved for particularly interesting bugs. Would you still be Daddy? Always. Would you still make star-shaped toast? Every morning. Would you still read me stories about brave people who fix things? Nathan smiled. Especially then. Luna nodded solemnly. Then I think that would be good. Mrs. Ruby seems nice, and Mr. Lincoln has kind eyes. Plus, she added with 6-year-old logic, if you work here during the day, maybe you could teach other people how to make dragons that breathe hope. Nathan hugged his daughter, finger paint and all. Maybe Ruby was right. Maybe this wasn't about going back to who he used to be. Maybe it was about becoming who he was always meant to be. When they returned to the conference room, they found Ruby and Lincoln deep in conversation over a laptop. Asher had disappeared, presumably to begin the massive undertaking of implementing Nathan's solution. How's our artist? Ruby asked, noting the colorful additions to Nathan's shirt. She thinks you have good potential, Nathan said. For someone who works in a really tall building. Ruby laughed. High praise indeed. Lincoln looked up from his laptop. Nathan, I want to offer you something. Not just a consulting contract or a temporary position. I want to offer you partnership in this. A seat at the table where decisions get made. Nathan felt Luna's small hand slip into his. What kind of partnership? The kind where you help us figure out what's next. This algorithm isn't just a solution. It's a platform. A foundation for building systems that don't just survive change, but thrive on it. Lincoln's eyes were bright with possibility. I want you to head a new division. Adaptive systems. Your team, your vision, your way of looking at problems. And if I fail, then we fail together, Ruby said. But I don't think that's going to happen. Nathan looked down at Luna, who was carefully wiping paint off her fingers with a wet wipe. What do you think, little star? Should Daddy help fix more things? Luna considered this with the seriousness of someone being asked to judge a very important case. Will there be dragons? Probably not literal ones, Nathan said. That's okay. You can teach people to see the invisible ones. Those are the best kind anyway. Nathan looked around the conference room, at the whiteboards covered with solutions, at Ruby's hopeful expression, at Lincoln's offered partnership, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, the sensation of coming home to a place he'd never been before. Okay, he said quietly. Let's see what we can build. Monday morning arrived with the weight of $2.8 billion in investor expectations. Nathan stood in the wings of Barrett Industries' presentation auditorium, wearing a suit that actually fit and a tie Luna had helped him pick out because it had tiny stars on it. His hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. You don't have to do this, Ruby said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. Lincoln can present the technical details. You can stay behind the scenes. Nathan accepted the coffee, gratefully, and let someone else tell the story of an algorithm that thinks like a living thing? I don't think so. That's the Nathan I was hoping to hear. Through the curtain, Nathan could see the auditorium filling with the kind of people who moved billions of dollars with phone calls and handshakes. Investment firm partners, hedge fund managers, technology journalists, and a handful of competitors who'd probably killed to get invitations to eye in the front row. Luna sat between Camila and Ellie Shepherd from HR, wearing a dress covered in planets, and clutching a handmade sign that read, "Go Daddy," in purple crayon. "At least I know one person in the audience is on my side," Nathan murmured. "Make that 3, Ruby said. "Camila's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're going to change the world. And Ellie thinks you walk on water after seeing the stress test results." Lincoln appeared, looking like a man who'd found his second wind after 3 months of running on fumes. "Ready to make history? Ready to not throw up on expensive shoes," Nathan replied. Lincoln clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit." The presentation began with Lincoln setting the stage. Barrett Industries' challenges, the competitive landscape, the $100 million problem that had nearly killed their expansion plans. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd built an empire, from smart decisions and calculated risks. Then he introduced the solution. 3 days ago, Lincoln told the audience, "Our optimization algorithm was effectively dead in the water. Today, I'm going to show you something that doesn't just solve supply chain management. It revolutionizes it." Nathan felt his cue approaching, like a freight train. "The man who made this breakthrough isn't who you'd expect," Lincoln continued. "He doesn't have an office on the executive floor. He didn't come from a competitor or a think tank. He came from right here, from the heart of this company, proving that innovation doesn't always wear a suit." Nathan walked onto the stage to scattered applause and a sea of curious faces. Behind him, screens lit up with his algorithm in action, clean lines of code that looked almost organic in their simplicity. "My name is Nathan Whitaker," he began, his voice carrying farther than he'd expected. 3 years ago, I was Dr. Nathan Whitaker, Systems Optimization Specialist. 3 years ago, I also became a single father trying to figure out how to raise a daughter alone." He paused, finding Luna's face in the front row. She gave him a thumbs up that made his heart settle into steadier rhythm. "I took a job here as a night janitor because it offered good insurance and flexible hours. For 3 years, I cleaned offices and stayed invisible. But last Friday night, I saw a problem I knew how to solve." Nathan clicked to the next slide, the elegant diagram he'd drawn on Lincoln's whiteboard that night. Traditional optimization algorithms try to predict and control. They assume that efficiency comes from elimination of variables. But supply chains aren't machines, they're ecosystems. They don't need control. They need adaptation. He walked through the technical details with the fluency of someone who'd lived inside the mathematics. But he also told the story in human terms. Resilient systems that bent without breaking, algorithms that learned from chaos instead of being destroyed by it. "The question isn't whether this system can handle disruption," Nathan said, pulling up the stress test results that had left Asher speechless. "The question is whether we're ready for a system that gets stronger because of disruption." The numbers spoke for themselves. 67% efficiency gains, $187 million in annual savings, 94% uptime under maximum stress conditions. But it was Nathan's closing words that turned scattered applause into a standing ovation. 3 years ago, I thought my career was over," he said, looking out at faces that had gone from skeptical to amazed. "I thought the only thing left was to clean up other people's successes. But my daughter taught me something that changed everything." He clicked to his final slide. Luna's drawing of a castle where fixing people lived with dragons that breathed hope. "She taught me that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person who's been invisible has been seeing everything. And sometimes," he paused, meeting Ruby's eyes in the wings, "the broken pieces of one life become the foundation of something better." The applause that followed felt like thunder. Nathan saw investors leaning forward, competitors scribbling notes, journalists typing frantically on phones. But all that mattered was Luna jumping up and down in the front row, her "Go Daddy" sign held high like a victory flag. After the formal Q&A session, after the handshakes and business cards and whispered conversations about partnerships, Nathan found himself alone with Ruby and Lincoln in the quiet auditorium. "So," Ruby said, grinning at her tablet, "how does it feel to have 12 different companies trying to poach you before you've even officially accepted Lincoln's offer?" "Overwhelming," Nathan admitted. "But also like maybe Luna was right about the magic thing." Lincoln laughed. Speaking of Luna, I believe someone promised her ice cream if Daddy's presentation went well. They found Luna in the lobby, regaling Camila and Ellie with detailed explanations of how dragons helped with heavy lifting. When she saw Nathan approaching, she ran to him with the kind of joy that made everything else fade to background noise. Daddy, you were amazing. Everyone clapped for so long I lost count. Nathan picked her up, not caring that his suit jacket would never recover from the hug. What did you think of the presentation? I think you forgot to mention the part about dragons breathing hope, she said seriously. But I think the grown-ups figured it out anyway. Nathan laughed, spinning her around once before setting her down. You're absolutely right, little star. Next time, I'll make sure to include the dragons. Promise, promise. Ruby watched this exchange with something soft and warm spreading across her features. You know, she said to Lincoln, I think we just hired the right man for the job. But it was Luna who had the last word, as she often did. Daddy, she said, tugging on Nathan's sleeve, now that you don't have to be invisible anymore, does that mean we can tell people our real superpower? What's our real superpower, little star? Luna grinned, the gap in her teeth making her look like a mischievous pixie. We make broken things beautiful again. Nathan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Yes, he said softly. I think that's exactly what we do. The auditorium was empty now except for the four of them and the lingering energy of a presentation that had just changed everything. Outside, the city hummed with Monday afternoon traffic, people rushing toward their own definitions of success. But inside this quiet space, Nathan Whitaker, former janitor, current miracle worker, eternal father, held his daughter's hand and felt like the richest man in the world. Because sometimes the most important revolutions happen not in boardrooms or algorithms, but in the quiet moment when someone who's been invisible finally learns to shine. 6 months later, Nathan's corner office on the 38th floor still felt like someone else's life. The walls were covered with Luna's artwork, not hidden away in desk drawers but framed and displayed like the masterpieces they were. A photo of Sarah sat on his desk beside a coffee mug that read, World's Most Adaptive Dad, Luna's latest creation from the Barrett Industries gift shop. Through his window, Nathan could see the city stretching toward the horizon, full of supply chains and systems and puzzles waiting to be solved. But what he saw most clearly was his reflection, a man who looked like he belonged exactly where he was. Daddy, are you ready for the surprise? Luna asked from the doorway, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. Today was Barrett Industries' 6-month celebration of the Adaptive Systems Division. What had started as Nathan's single algorithm had grown into a full department with 12 employees, 3 major corporate clients, and a waiting list of companies desperate to implement chaos-resilient optimization systems. More importantly, at least to Luna, today was also Bring Your Family to Work Day, an event she'd been planning for weeks with the intensity of a general preparing for battle. I'm ready, Nathan said, straightening his tie, still the one with tiny stars. What's the surprise? You have to come see. Luna led him through hallways that hummed with productive energy toward the main conference room. Through the glass walls, Nathan could see his team gathered around their latest project, an optimization system for renewable energy distribution that had the potential to revolutionize green technology. But as they approached the elevator, Nathan noticed something different. People were smiling at him, not the polite deference he'd grown accustomed to, but genuine warmth. Colleagues waved from their desks. Assistants called out greetings. Even Asher Holden, who had become Nathan's unlikely ally after the stress test triumph, gave him a thumbs up from across the lobby. Luna, Nathan said suspiciously, what exactly did you plan? You'll see. But first, we have to pick up Mrs. Ruby and Mr. Lincoln. They found Ruby in her office, wearing jeans and a Barrett Industries hoodie, her hair in a messy bun that somehow made her look both professional and approachable. Over the past 6 months, she'd become more than Nathan's colleague. She'd become family in the way that mattered most. Ready for Luna's big reveal? Ruby asked, joining them in the hallway.